If the governing board approve consent agenda items A through J in accordance with policy BEDB-R.
Second. It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're up to educational service. The presentation on Macon School's dual language program.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board and cabinet. It's a pleasure to speak to you this evening. I'm always happy to communicate with the board and share some of the work that's happening at our school. And I welcome the questions at the end of what I will share with you this evening. I'm going to talk to you about our dual language program at your request, provide an update on the program as it currently is, and I'm going to go back through some history and some of the dynamics that have come together over the last 10 years in particular that have impacted the program and bring us to where we currently are. So I will begin with trying to figure out how to a bit of the history of our program. We actually have provided Spanish language instruction to students since as far back as 1998. At that time, we were able to obtain, and this predates my time at the school, but the school was able to obtain both as part of the district system-wide Title VII grant and the school site Title VII grant, specific targeted funding to implement a Spanish-English dual language program at the school. The program served the entire school in its early days. All students had the opportunity to learn in two languages. Each grade level, the model basically had teachers paired, one teacher who provided the English model with a teacher who provided the Spanish model, and then the students moved back and forth between those two teachers to have equal time. Approximately 50% of their instruction in English and 50% of the instructional delivery was done in Spanish. If this sounds familiar to you, it's similar to what I believe is happening at our school within our district now, Biltmore Preparatory School.
Mr. Dupin,
Yes.
Was that something that parents could opt out of, or was it just all of the parents did the whole 50-50?
To be honest with you, that is because it was before my time. I really don't know the answer to that question. Typically, all of these programs involve a level of choice.
It was a choice.
You can never, nor do I believe it would be good practice to require participation in a particular program like this that is very different from what a mainstream set of offerings is. And again, the students had equal opportunity to learn in both languages if they were participating. Reading and math, writing were the particular areas of focus, but students also had the opportunity to learn science and social studies, and they spent a lot of time working on building community in the two languages. At that time, cultural literacy as well as academic literacy were significant areas of focus for the school. So learning about culture and language was as important as learning to use the language of instruction. Again, building cultural awareness was critical at that time. We've undergone a lot of transformation and transition in terms of legal policy, legal statute in our state. We have undergone a number of changes due to federal and state accountability within the school, all of which have come together to impact the structure of our program. There are some specific highlights that I want to share. In 2000, you will likely recall that Proposition 203 became law in our state, and this placed a significant set of guidelines and parameters around the use of non-English languages in schools. Students had to qualify for waivers in order to participate in any kind of instruction that was not in English if they were a public school student in the state of Arizona.
Did that include if they were already English proficient?
There are 3 provisions for waivers, and I'll go through them in a
Okay.
second in the PowerPoint. That is
Thanks.
one of them. The student is already proficient, or they have demonstrated proficiency on a language assessment. That's the first parameter for obtaining a waiver, or the first qualification. As you know, those of you who've been on the board for a number of years, you've followed Macon's, what I would say, decline into federal and state school improvement, and then our arduous climb out of federal and state school improvement, and we're still there, but we've made significant progress in terms of academic achievement of students. And in 2005, we began to be identified as a school not making AYP, and that placed a set of parameters, a set of accountability structures around the school, and the requirement to demonstrate academic progress in English went up significantly. In 2007, the school was labeled as failing to meet academic standards, which imposed another set of state accountability measures. And by accountability measures, I refer to everything from state solutions team visits that happened at the school site, monthly meetings with state personnel from the Arizona Department of Education, frequent monitoring visits from the Office of English Language Acquisition. My first years at the school, we were visited on a yearly basis by OLSP in order to determine whether or not we were legally compliant with the parameters of the law governing non-English instruction. In every one of those visits, I'm very proud of the fact that we were found to be compliant. There were never any questions or concerns with the legality of the implementation of our program. But we've had to work very hard in order to make sure that we followed the law and had waivers in place, for all students who were in the program. And then in 2008, we began our initiative as part of districts and schools moving up, and we began to implement all the systems and structures that are part of our current set of reforms. When you are dealing with all of these types of accountability structures, the ultimate measure of student learning is collected in English. Therefore, in order to meet the requirements of these structures, we had to be able to demonstrate academic progress in English, and we had to begin to prioritize. And so as we went deeper into the accountability structures and systems, we began to place a greater emphasis on English instruction in order to increase fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension, as well as math for our students. Also, keep moving this the wrong way. With the challenges in addressing staff turnover, our Human Resources Department works very hard to find highly qualified teachers for all of our schools. Finding highly qualified teachers who are also highly gifted in 2 languages is a significant challenge. And over the course of those years, I didn't put it in the PowerPoint, but we've transitioned nearly all of the staff at the school. So every time a new teacher is brought into the campus, an evaluation has to be done and determining whether or not they meet all of the requirements of a highly qualified teacher in Creighton District. And they must also, if they're going to be in a program like this, they must also be bilingual. Those people are rare and difficult to find. We found them, and we continue to seek them out, but it requires intention and it requires a high level of focus. We, as mentioned, we do have waiver provisions that are currently in the law. They govern all children in the state of Arizona, public school children, who wish to participate in non-English instructional programs. You have to be fluent or a native speaker, and by fluency, you can test proficiency as 5 on the ESELA. Within certain components of the ESELA, you can participate and have a waiver. You can be 10 years old or older. There is a provision there for older students. And you can have been in an English immersion program for 45 days and not made progress, and it can be the informed belief of the school personnel and the teachers that that child has a justified special need, which requires them to receive a portion of their instruction in a non-English language. That requires, I believe, a 250-word essay written by the parent that is submitted to not only the site administrator, but the superintendent as well for review and final approval. All of these have to be approved by the site administrator, and in the case of waiver 3s, they have to be approved by the superintendent as well, even to get in the door of a non-English instructional program.
I have a question more probably for Dr. Boyle and Dr. Bachner, a couple of questions. First of all, at the time that Prop 203 passed in 2000, I think it was 203, was Macon the only school, or did other schools have similar programs to this?
Machan and Creighton School wrote for and received a federal dual language grant for their site. So we had two site grants, and the district wrote for a dual language grant and were awarded that grant. And therefore, the other sites in the district also received support in implementing dual language.
Okay. And then my other question that I had is, with our current foreign language immersion program at Biltmore Preparatory Academy, do parents have to sign the waiver for their children to get into the FLI program?
If a student has a language other than English at home, that child needs to be tested. You know, there's a form and that child would need to be tested. That child who has a home language other than English would need to be tested as proficient to go into a foreign language immersion. If a child is an English speaker and there's no home language other than English, that does not start a process where there needs to be assessment. Do you want to add anything to that, Joe? Dr. Bachner?
The waivers would come into place if they were not proficient
Mm-hmm.
on that test. Other than that, an English speaker doesn't have to have anything.
Right.
How do we know what the home language is of a child? Is it because the parent tells us?
Mm-hmm. It's an
Okay.
enrollment. It's an enrollment form.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Mhm.
Dr. Fowler,
Uh-huh.
question, just to kind of differentiate between what dual language means from foreign language immersion. Tell me if I'm wrong, but the foreign language immersion is focused actually to teach the kids another language, and is dual language just to offer instruction in multiple languages, but not really focus on teaching that language? Is that the difference?
Actually, our dual language programs were exactly the same. When we wrote for the grants, it was 50-50. 50% English and 50% Spanish. And actually, there were bilingual teams or dual language teams. One teacher was fluent in Spanish and the other in English. And basically, the classrooms were almost mirror identities. So if in a second grade team, if the English classroom would have all of the, whatever things were up for student learning visuals, and the Spanish classroom would be exactly the same, but it would be in Spanish. And the Spanish teacher spoke to the students really only in Spanish. That was the design, and vice versa with the English teacher. And again, subject matter was determined. So the language arts was in English, math and science were in Spanish, social studies was in English. So it was very, very similar to a foreign language immersion.
Okay. So I guess what I don't get is how come at Mackin you had to be 10, but
That was just one of the 3 waivers.
That's
A waiver.
if you were 10, you needed to get a waiver.
Mm.
Oh.
If you were-
We have students that are both waiver 1 and waiver 2. Those are the 3 ways you can get a waiver.
Do you want
We
to
don't have any waivers.
explain the first 2 waivers? Did you already?
Again, any child, if a parent wants it, and parent choice is critical to this. There are some prohibitions in the law against us actually going out and marketing the program, recruiting or sending home materials with children saying, hey, come sign up for our dual language program. But if a parent wants to come in and ask, they can qualify if their child is fluent in English already, or they've tested and determined and have been found to be fluent, or they're 10 years old or older, or they have that identified special needs. So any of those 3 ways can allow a child to enter a dual language or foreign language immersion program. So we have to move
I
forward.
believe the first year I was on the board, I went to Creighton and I met with Rosemary and the person in charge of the dual language program, and it was a good hour or so, and it was explained to me. The big difference I see is